Welcome to Age of AI, Politics, Law, and Society, hosted by Medlir Mema, Chris Lamont, and Young Diogenes, in association with the Global Governance Institute in Brussels.
Today we're joined by Egor Olteanu, the CEO of Volt.ai, a company using AI to detect and mitigate physical threats in real time. Volt.ai is making headlines for its role in protecting people and property from a wide range of threats, including crime, violence, and medical emergencies. But what does this mean for privacy, policy, and the future of public safety? Egor, welcome to Age of AI.
Thank you for having me.
Well, so we have some, I think, important questions to ask, but first let's start with basics. Tell us a little bit about yourself, but also what led you to create Volt.ai. And then I have a couple follow-ups to that.
I joined the military, U.S. Army specifically, right after high school. And after spending a few years there, I got out, got my bachelor degree in international relations, and then got an MBA. I was also recruited after school by Google's research and development department called Google X, where I spent 8 years essentially working on things like research and development on different type of products, risk management, physical security, etc. And back in 2019, following an active shooter situation that happened at one of our buildings in San Bruno, California, my childhood friend that I've been friends with for 24 years, and I decided to start Volt. And the idea behind it was that, in our opinion, we did not see any systems in the physical security space that were real-time systems specifically designed to detect, validate, mitigate, and then transfer the information necessary in order to either prevent a safety or security event from happening, or if it cannot be prevented, addressing it so quickly that you actually have the chance of lowering the negative effects of it. And on that journey, we started, obviously, after a bunch of iterations, we had a functional prototype. With that, we raised our first venture capital round. Once we started deploying to early adopters, we raised our second round. And once we actually got a good set of paying customers, we raised our Series A. So now going to more and more customers.
An upward ascent. Congratulations for that. And that's wonderful. And you hinted at a couple of these early incidents. Was there a specific incident or trend that made you realize this technology was urgently needed? You talked about there's been a niche there and an absence of these types of approaches, but was there something that got you going?
So specifically, it was that shooting that happened in San Bruno.
Okay.
Because in my mind, I could not understand how a company such as wonderful as Google is, with all the money in the world, with all the engineering power in the world, and the capabilities to do that, what was missing? And then we started doing our research. It's not that we didn't see that there's other AI companies applying sort of technology to the physical security space. It was more that, in our opinion, there was a critical component missing, and specifically that's real-time analysis and transfer of information, but also the geolocational component that would allow you to pinpoint the exact location of a particular incident. And then if that incident becomes dynamic and starts moving through your area of operations, continuously update that information to whoever needs to either manage or respond to the incident. We thought that was missing. Nobody else was doing that. And we wanted to give it a shot at building it and see how it works.
And there seems to be a nexus here as well. I mean, in our conversation offline, you were talking about being in the graduating class of 2001, if I'm from right, or you were here in 2001, and then 9/11 seems to have had an impact in terms of both you joined the Army. There seems to be a theme here in terms of threats, societal threats. How much of a role has that played, kind of like in the way you approach this?
A fairly significant one. Like I was telling you that I was in math class on that Tuesday when 9/11 happened. And of course, it was a very tragic event that shook up many lives, including a lot of folks in high school like I was. And many of my friends from high school joined the military, different branches.
Yeah.
So that played a very big role in me deciding to join the military instead of going straight to college. But also because I was fairly quickly deployed to the Middle East, I realized I had different jobs there, but one of the jobs that I had is we would have to go in and clear different objectives.
Mm-hmm.
And as a 19-year-old kid, I had this thought, I probably saw it in some science fiction movie, that wouldn't it be great if I had some sort of a device that I could throw through a window or throw through a hole in the wall to get a very quick snapshot of a heat signature of what's inside that location. Meaning, is it one person, is it 0 people, is it 15 people? Because just that knowledge would significantly increase the chances of success of that particular mission.
Right.
Now, I did absolutely nothing with that idea because I had no technology. I was just a 19-year-old kid serving in the army. But after college, and once I started working for Google, which again is a fantastic company, and the amount of very smart engineers they have is amazing, I started little by little understanding what is technology capable of doing and what is it not capable of doing. And I think when that event in 2018, I believe it happened, that kind of started clicking together, saying there's existing cameras everywhere. Wouldn't it be possible to connect it to some sort of an AI brain, let's just call it that, give full situational awareness of your area of operations, be it indoors or outdoors, meaning every camera knows what it sees, but all the other cameras also know what this camera is seeing. So you essentially have not just a very, very laser-focused snapshot of one camera, but you have full situational awareness of how things unfold in day-to-day operations. And I believe a system like that could start understanding what the real-time risk profiles are, and be it a event trigger, like a security or safety event that was designated by the customer, or an anomaly that happened and does not fit into the day-to-day operations that the system has been seeing for the past few weeks or few months. Catching events like that, anomalies like that early, would potentially, at least at that point we were thinking so, allow either to stop that from happening or address it so quickly that you have the chances to essentially mitigate a lot of the negative impact that a very bad security or safety situation could do.
And given, I think, the high threshold, or rather the high risks associated with these kinds of situations, I'm thinking about a phrase you used earlier about real-time AI. And so you're working at this, your company works at this nexus of real-time AI and human safety, which is a very compelling kind of narrative and phrase and way to come up. But it's also a big responsibility when you say we react in real time to these things. And I imagine, again, going back to your 19-year-old self in the Middle East, thinking, I want real-time information because my safety and those around me, and perhaps those on the other side, relies on me having that information in real time. What does real-time AI mean in practice?
All right. So the best way that I can put this is that we are all aware that there's plenty of cameras out there that are deployed, right? Now, there's really 2 ways that a camera system works. It can be recording only, meaning nobody's actually watching those real-time recordings. And then if something happens, people go back, they pull up the video. Hopefully they have the video of the event unfolding, at least from some angles. Then they do the analysis and essentially understand what can we do better in the future, be it physical improvements or training improvements or staffing improvements, in order to minimize the chances of that happening again. There is another version of it, meaning that we do have people looking at cameras. But this is where the actual saturation and penetration rates come into play. Meaning, if you're an organization that has 500 cameras, so what are the chances that you're going to have people being able to look at all 500 cameras every single second, every single hour, every single day, nonstop? Slim to none. I believe the rate is about 3 to 5% of cameras are actually being watched at any given moment.
Goodness.
So something unfolding and the person has perfect attention span looking at that cameras, again, it virtually does not happen. So by the time something actually happens, be it as violent as a shooting, God forbid, but most of day-to-day incidents are safety things, are like unauthorized access and people falling down in fights and whatever the case may be. Meaning, incidents still get missed. So even though technically it's a real-time system, they have people watching it, the reality is that it's not going to get noticed. They have to go pull up the video. And by the time they actually realize what is happening, where is it happening, and what to do about it, it's already too late. Now it goes back into okay, it happened. Let's pull up the video. Let's figure out how to prevent it from happening in the future. We took a different approach. What we want to do is say, well, can we turn all these cameras to essentially be monitored with the same level of precision, accuracy, consistency, be it 1 camera or be it 1,000 cameras? And AI can do that, absolutely. I mean, we bet on that back then that I could do that, and now we've proven that I can. And if that happens, meaning if something does happen, you immediately pull it up front and center in front of the incident commander, or you send that information to whoever needs to respond, be it 911 or internal security teams. And the trick to it is not just to notify them, but if you notify them of something that is happening, validated, of course, and we can spend some time after talking about what validated is. If they know what is happening, now they can immediately take action on it. But then take it a step further. I don't just need to know what is happening. I need to know where it's happening, because an organization can have 75 gray stairwells. And if you don't know where that gray stairwell is, it's going to take you 5 minutes just to understand where it is. But also, if something is dynamic, meaning there's an assault happening, there's an intrusion happening, and it starts moving through your areas of operation, in order to get to it as quickly as possible, you need to know the current location, and ideally the path of travel that this event is taken. This allows you to respond to where the problem currently is and not where it was initially identified, because it could be drastically different. We're talking about hundreds of yards. So incorporating that detection, real-time detection, the real-time transfer of information, as well as the real-time understanding of geolocation as it progresses, and sending that and updating that information in real time to whoever needs to respond or manage the incident, that, in my opinion, is a very good application of technology, specifically AI, in real time when it comes to risk management.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And you anticipate some of these questions that I have about this, but one of them, it's obviously you're analyzing thousands of data sources, a lot of camera feeds. How do you distinguish credible threats from noise?
It is very difficult to do.
Yeah.
So most of these events are not object detections, meaning that let's detect a bag or let's detect a chair. As by themselves, they don't really possess a threat. Sure, if a tree comes through a window, that is something that you want to know about. But what we tend to focus on is actions. Has there been some activity in an area after hours where it's not supposed to be? Are people that are walking into this place authorized to be there or not between these certain hours? Is there a fight? Has somebody all of a sudden collapsed? Things like that. So we immediately, including weapons, like the presence of weapons, we immediately realized that essentially there's two ways to do this. And keep in mind that I'm not an engineer. Dimitri is the smart one on the team, but I know a little bit. But essentially, you can turn up the sensitivity of our detections, which means that you will catch everything, but also a bunch of noise.
Yeah.
Or you can turn down the sensitivity and you will not catch any noise, well, generally speaking, but you also may miss some true negatives, true positives. So how do you solve for that? And our first thought was like, okay, cool. So let's have multiple levels of validation. Meaning the first level of validation, it's a wide net. We catch everything. Then it immediately goes through the second level of validation that has a more strict criteria, right? A higher, essentially, confidence threshold, that if it passes, we know that it's 99.99% that this is not a false positive, so we can go to the end user. Because the last thing that you want is all of that noise coming in, as we currently know that is happening with a bunch of sensors, where people, instead of dealing with problems, they're dealing with understanding, is this a real incident, is this not a real incident, which is very manpower and time consuming. But then we also realize that sometimes, because you're dealing with a lot of contextual information, that's also not enough. AI is not ready to do that. So what we've implemented, essentially a human in a loop system, where we have an operations center, well, we have a couple, that the most difficult events, they go through a third layer of validation, which is the human validators, meaning they're not there to watch your cameras. It's physically impossible to watch all the cameras that we support. But those difficult events, it pops front and center, and then it essentially says, is this an intrusion? Is this not an intrusion? Based on the video data they're getting. Is this a weapon? Is this not a weapon? If it is, great. It gets escalated to the end user. So now we know that it's validated. If it's not, it gets dismissed. The end user never sees that noise, and it goes into our training queue essentially to improve our models. Now, fundamentally speaking, there's nothing difficult about these three layers. The difficult is, how do you do all of that and still keep the system in real time?
Mm-hmm.
And we decided that 30 seconds or less would be real time, because this still gives you, to essentially remove all the noise in a span of 30 seconds. And sometimes we can do it faster than that. To be able to validate it, it still allows the incident commanders and the responders to take action and treat this as a real-time incident, because after the validation, all the updated information in terms of still imagery, relocation, video information, so all the intel that you need to address that problem is being updated to you without you having to click any buttons.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm going to come back to a couple of scenarios, but because we are here, this topic, which I was anticipating for a little bit later, so I appreciate you, though, pitching this. There's this, obviously, on the battlefield, the deployment of AI-enabled weapon systems, autonomous weapon systems. There are a lot of questions there about human in the loop, out of the loop, and on the loop, and always associated with that series of questions. And I think you addressed that and where the human comes into that. So I don't want to rehash that conversation. But one of the conversations that is almost never answered or answerable is the question of liability and responsibility. How do you resolve that? Who's liable if an AI system fails to detect the threat, or worse, falsely identifies one?
Well, you did mention battlefield. So I've never worked with autonomous systems of battle. In the closest that we came, we had eyes in the sky that we would launch.
So I'd imagine, I was thinking as you're talking about this, that this perhaps is the beginning of your fulfillment of your dream as a 19-year-old to have something there in real time. So I imagine that's the Volt.ai 2.0, but that's for another day perhaps, so we'll see.
Amazing companies that do that very well. So whether we do that or not in the future, it's time will tell. But for right now, we're focused on primarily the education.
Yeah.
You asked about liability. So we look at it slightly different, meaning that if you don't have Volt, what happens if that incident does not get?
Well, I imagine the people that should be paying attention to the cameras would be accountable for it. And we have had this in a couple of cases where security officers, others have been held. I think Uvalde's case, where security officers did not respond in time. And so that is clear because there's no automation, right? There's no AI. The human is meant to be, and they are accountable. But now, because there is a filter or 2 or 3 different filters before it goes to the human, what happens if that process doesn't work as it should? Where does the liability fall there?
So here's the thing. I don't think that they're actually accountable. We've seen so many things that go wrong. Those people, it is physically impossible for them to actually do that and be like, well, if something goes wrong, you are personally responsible for it. Sure, there's operations, military and the DoD and all that other stuff, that it's a very different thing, but they also have a very different approach to those the type of people that are monitoring this information and the levels that they have at what they do it. We typically, when we go in, we are faced not with that we're bringing you a system that is going to do better than your people. We're faced with the fact that so many incidents happen and nobody's paying attention to them. There's no people that are actually looking at those cameras. So what we're bringing is essentially another level of effectiveness.
And I guess the question, Egor, if I may, the question is this, because having Volt.ai there or any other system, right? This isn't about this particular system, but having one of those and signaling saying, listen, we are going to scan everything. We are assuming that you guys are not monitoring the cameras. As you said, only 2 or 3% are actually being monitored at any time, especially if it's a big, company or whatever. It's going to be impossible but there's an expectation that humans are monitoring. But now you're signaling to those people and saying, listen, we'll take care of this on the front end. We'll alert you when there's something worthwhile to look at. And so now you're signaling to them saying, don't worry, this is under control. We have this. And then if we don't signal, then there's nothing wrong. And I guess, again, my question keeps coming back is, well, then people are relying on you providing that information. What happens if you miss that information? What are the kinds of conversations you're having? What kind of legal protections and others are you considering?
So I'm not a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is that the initial conversations and the expectations to be set are very important, meaning that we don't go and we don't promise extremes, meaning that you have nothing and we're going to give you perfection. Perfection doesn't exist.
Right.
Any system in the world will not give you perfection. What we promise is that it's going to be better than what you currently have. But we're very explicit on saying that mistakes will happen, failures will happen because no system is perfect. And when they do, right, at least we'll be able to tell you why.
Yeah.
And as those conversations immediately spark saying, well, can you give us example? And there's a very simple example saying, okay, cool. Imagine that there's a standard room that has 10 cameras, brand new cameras, the lighting is perfect, the floors are white, everybody's wearing black, and they move in slowly. The contrast, the angles, the lighting, everything is perfect, and there's so many cameras that detections are easy.
Yeah.
Now, in a different scenario, imagine that you have a stadium, the camera is 400 feet away, it's 10 years old, the lens is sunburned, all the floors are red, everybody's wearing red, and there's 5,000 people that are moving very quickly at any given moment. What are the chances of detecting something there?
Yeah.
Immediately drops to nearly zero, right? And that is the reality, that every single detection is different. Every single facility is different. Every single operation is different. So we train to be as good as a human eye, just a human eye that doesn't need a break, doesn't need food, doesn't need multiple shifts, right? But just as the human eye is, we can only detect what we can see. Yeah. And once those variables start decreasing the chances of successful detections, yes, certain things will be missed and certain things will not be detected just because it is virtually impossible at this level because technology will continue to improve.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I just have curious a little bit as I was preparing for our conversation today. I ran into a news article that was talking about Volt.ai, and there is obviously last August, there was an assassination attempt against now President Trump. And it was implied in the article that perhaps Volt.ai could have helped prevent that kind of incident. Now, this is a very specific, unique kind of incident. Any thoughts on that, how that played out in this case?
Yes. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, please.
So, when it happened, my co-founder and I were talking about it, and it's very easy to start giving suggestions. Yeah. What is it called? Like Monday morning quarterbacking?
Yeah. Armchair quarterbacking.
Stuff like that. So, yes, theoretically, and we've done this before with some pilots that we ran, that you can have standalone cameras and tripods, and you can run a network, and you can actually set up and detect certain things. And if the conditions were perfect, where the cameras would be looking exactly at the right place, and this could have been detected, and the information could have been sent. Now, did you hear the amount of ifs that I used?
Yeah.
Because to anticipate exactly where the threat is going to happen, and then you're going to have redundancy in the networks, and that whoever you send this information to at that given moment actually sees it in time to take action, and you have redundancy in the chain of command, meaning that if they don't see it, that goes to somebody else. All of that is doable. But there's so many variables that if one of them fails, chances are that the whole system is going to be
So, Egor, this has been a very refreshing kind of explanation. Oftentimes when we have this conversation, there's always a tendency to overpromise or to just paint this kind of ideal picture. And I appreciate your candor in terms of saying, hey, there's a reality check here. Technology is technology. There are blind spots, and often a lot of times depends on human ingenuity as well. This isn't just technology doing things. And I think this kind of answers some of the questions that I had and raised a little bit earlier about where does the human fall in this conversation. It seems to me that the human is essential to this whole operation. Let me just, as we close, just one question, future-oriented question. So the future of AI and public safety in a way. So looking ahead, what do you see as the next frontier for AI and real-world safety?
The next frontier of AI and real-world safety. I do believe that robotics is going to be the next big one. I don't know if it's going to be in 5 years or if it's going to be in 10 years. But safety and security has been done the same way since the Great Wall of China, essentially. And in my opinion, the reason that AI is becoming so popular in physical security, because it is a much needed approach where you can process a lot of layers of information continuously, right? And actually start understanding the patterns that are happening in your areas of operations in order to address those risks better. Now, just like I said, that it's a lot easier to monitor thousands of cameras with AI instead of human eyes, think about all those roving guards that essentially they try to be in the right location at the right time. They're always walking around, or they're always responding somewhere without actually understanding if they're responding in the right place. If they're deployed close enough to optimize or to minimize the time of response. And I think that as different robotics platforms like drones, like dogs, like, I don't know, little dune buggies, whatever, call them what you want, As they become more and more commoditized, I think they're going to start being implemented more and more for the same reason, because they don't need to eat, they don't need to sleep, and they can just run 24/7 for many years and essentially be roving cameras, which is a very big part of having respect. And I do think that the companies that become market leaders in the AI space and the physical security space, because they will have so much penetration into the different cameras of different organizations, they will be the ones that will have the highest success chances in integrating a lot of these robotics platforms essentially to take this to the next step.
Thank you for that. Maybe the final one, because we're talking about the future of this, which way this is going, but are there any sectors you think that should not adopt kind of technology? Like there's this, we talk about, and you have a social science background as I do, this idea of precautionary principle in the face of scientific uncertainty about outcomes of deploying new technologies, especially in areas where it could be irreversible damage that could happen because of this implementation. Normally, you should take a cautionary approach. So be cautious about this. Do you think there are any sectors? You've been in this space for such a long time, and I've been talking to a lot of people, and it seems like everybody wants to embrace AI. But are there areas in our life, perhaps, that, or various sectors of industry as well, where maybe we should just slow down this adoption of AI?
I'm not a fan of that. I do like moving fast and breaking. I think the greatest things ever created since the history of humanity have been done by people that push the envelope. Now, with that being said, I do like, I wouldn't call it cautionary approaches, but I would call it left seat, right seat.
Okay.
Term that I got from the military, meaning that before you can run, you need to learn how to walk. And in certain cases, if you are dealing like, hey, let's see if AI can do people counting very well. This is something that you can deploy, and if it fails, there's not a very high something bad going wrong. But if you say all of a sudden, hey, cool, a commercial airliner, the pilot only flies 3 minutes out of that whole flight. So let's make sure, that AI is now taking over the whole thing. Would you get on that plane? I wouldn't. Because I still want the human involved in it. Humans are not going away anytime soon. And actually, I would argue they will never go away, because things like we're emotional human beings. The customer that goes behind that is just, it's irreplaceable, at least in my opinion, by AI. So maybe industries that have a direct high impact on the health of people, like aviation, like medical services, like prescription services, all of that stuff. If you are going to start implementing AI, maybe you start with a 5% implementation, and 95 has been done by human and validated, and then give it some very rigorous milestones to hit and move it to 10% instead of going from 5% to 50%, which some industries can get away from. You're still pushing the envelope. You're still going to break some things. You're going to see some failures, you're going to get some learnings. But at least you understand that by the time you actually are ready to Pareto's law, 80-20, to 80% AI and 20% people, you have done so much rigorous testing that you know that chances are everything is going to go okay. And yes, there will be failures, but they will not be on a global scale. Of course, that means that the efficiencies that come with it, they're not going to come as fast. You're still going to be spending a lot of money on the inefficiencies that do come with people. But what do you want to prioritize? Do you want to prioritize the health and safety of people? Or do you want to prioritize the efficiencies and the profits that come with it? So,
yeah,
there's no further I can explain it.
While you say that you are in favor of moving fast and breaking things, it seems to me that that still is very a cautious way of doing things, right? Not in the sense of, well, let's see what happens. But as you said, just testing things. I think I can get behind that. So thank you for that, Egor. Really appreciate you taking your time today, and really enjoyed actually in preparation for this, learning more about your products and just generally about what your company and others do in this particular space. Any big news about Volt.ai? What's next for you? And are you still waiting to unveil that?
I think within the next month, you will hear some big news, but I'm definitely not going to tell you now.
All right. Well, stay tuned. Thank you again for joining us. Appreciate it. And of course, always thank you to our listeners. From innovation to accountability, it seems that Volt.ai's work raises urgent questions for anyone concerned about the role of AI in society. Of course, to learn more about this and other AI-related developments, please join us again next time for another discussion at the intersection of law, society, and politics. Until then, stay human.